Many of you have written to us asking for a video about what's going on in Turkey, and believe me, the situation there is quite dangerous. And in case you were wondering, no, this time Donald Trump is not to blame for this. In fact, the US sanctions are just the tip of the iceberg here. And this is an iceberg that could wreck many ships. And when we say ships, we really mean European banks. Just look at the map we're showing here. Turkey is a bridge between Europe and Asia. We're talking about a country with a population as big as Germany, a country where Europe has been investing for decades. Companies, factories, and of course, there are lots and lots of loans. Want an example? Well, here you are. Have you ever heard of BBVA? It's the second biggest bank in Spain. Well, Turkey is the third biggest market for this bank. In other words, when the Turks sneeze, a lot of Europeans end up with a cold. Aren't scared enough yet? Well, listen up.
Turkey is an important NATO member. After America, they have the biggest army in the alliance, and they are one of the few countries with a Muslim majority and secular constitution, at least for now.
Yep, you heard that right. We said so far. The truth is that the Turkish president,
Recep Tayyip Erdogan,
well, he is not a big fan of secularism. Erdogan is something like the Anakin Skywalker of politics. He started out as the good guy in the movie, but we all know that eventually he will fall to the dark side. In this case, the dark side is a mix between religious fanaticism and, well, good old populism. Erdogan likes to portray himself as the defender of the average man, those Turks that live in rural areas like Konya, completely outside of the glamour of Istanbul. The Turks there, they don't have amazing salaries and they maintain a traditional lifestyle. And, well, who do these people need to be protected against? Well, of course, that would be the Western conspiracy that wants to end Turkey. This explains why news like this is so important for Erdogan's narrative.
US imposes sanctions on Turkish officials over detained American pastor.
Nonetheless, this is just the tip of the iceberg. First of all, the actual reason behind the US sanctions is not the pastor, but the military and sanctions with the Kurds in Syria. But that's another story for another video. The truth is, Turkey's crisis has been going on for 3 years already. And this isn't just a political crisis. In fact, the biggest problem is economics. We're talking about a small-scale Venezuela here, right at the very gates of Europe. But now the question is, what is going on in Turkey? What happens in this country to cause them to fall to the dark side of economics? And importantly, do we really have to be scared? Today we're going to answer all of these questions, but before we do, as always, let's take a look back at the history.
Erdogan, the savior.
Turkey is famous for merry things: Saint Sophia kebabs and inflation. Since 1970 and until the year 2000, Turkey had sky-high inflation rates. Many years they even surpassed the 100% mark. This means that from one year to the next, prices would double. And what happens when you have so much inflation and you live so close to wealthy European countries? Well, you become a cheap labor Disneyland. Companies like Renault of Peugeot build lots of factories in Turkey. But hold on a second, because I can guess what you're probably thinking. Right now you're probably thinking, well, okay, Simon, but isn't this actually good news for a country? Well, yes and no at the same time. For example, in the 1960s, Renault opened a factory in Bursa, a city in northern Turkey. Manufacturing cars in Bursa was very cheap for Renault. Since the Turkish Lira was devaluing year after year, Renault had to pay lower and lower salaries. Nonetheless, when they got the money from selling those cars, do you really think they kept it inside Turkey? Of course not. If Turkish money was losing value so fast, the smartest thing you could do with your money was take it out of the country as fast as you possibly could. This is why Turkey seemed doomed to stagnation. That was until the year 2003. That's the year Erdogan came to power. His main goal was to keep inflation below 10%. He created a new currency, the Turkish Lira. This was a currency far more stable than the previous one. And as soon as inflation was in hand, the Turkish economy, it made a 180-degree shift. All of a sudden, many European companies started investing in Turkey. This included banks. One of them, the Spanish BBVA we mentioned previously, invested in this country big time. In fact, so much so that now Turkey is their third largest market. So in the 2000s, Turkey, it was in fashion. Rule of law and monetary stability meant that companies could reinvest in the country. So in less than 10 years, your average Turkish worker went from making $800 a month to making more than $1,200 a month. But not only that, in those first Erdogan years, new industries like tourism developed. Turkey went from 13 million tourists to 39 million. And what about Turkish companies? Well, have you ever heard of Turkish Airlines? In the 90s, Turkish Airlines was just another carrier, but since they could now reinvest their profit, they ended up becoming an aviation juggernaut. And believe me, this is not an isolated case. If there's one great example of the Turkish mineral, it has to be Yıldız Holdings. This company started out as a family-owned bakery, and now they've already bought European brands like Godiva chocolates or United biscuits. Today, Yıldız Holdings is the world's third biggest company in the entire food sector. So in other words, the Turkish economy, it was absolutely on fire. And since the economy was on fire, no one really seemed to care that Erdogan had been to prison for being a part of a radical group. At the end of the day, the country was still democratic and Erdogan was the Arab rock star. He was the chosen one. He was the one who was going to bring the Islamic world to the bright side. Back then, Turkey wanted to be European. They were just about to become a member of the European Union. As a fun fact, in 2003, they even won the Eurovision Song Contest. But as you might know, the negotiations to become a part of the EU extended over a really long time. So what happens? Well, Erdogan lost his patience and he essentially said, "Oh what, so I'm not cool enough to join your club? Well, you know what? I'm tired of being Western. I'm tired of a separation of powers. I'm tired of secularism. All of that, it's now over. Now is the time for
The new Erdogan-onomics.
In the last 5 years, things started to sour for Erdogan. First, he was personally involved in many corruption cases, but worst of all was news like this.
Istanbul Ataturk airport attack. 41 dead and more than 230 hurt.
Daesh attacks have brought Islamic terrorism and insecurity to the streets of Turkey, and the damage to the tourism industry was immediate. In just 2 years, tourism income has fallen by 25%. And this is especially worrying given that tourism accounts for 13% of the Turkish economy. But that's not all. Foreign investment has fallen by half. And now you might be wondering, well, why? Well, there are two reasons for this. The first one is the lack of a chance that Turkey is going to become a part of the European Union. And the second one, well, that's Erdogan himself. Yes, dear viewer, Islamic radicalism is not just a danger politics-wise. It is also a danger for economics.
Turkey's Erdogan calls interest rates the mother of all evil. The lira slides.
According to Erdogan, the so-called economic orthodoxy is a Western invention that will destabilize Turkey. This borrowing money with interest thing, it goes against Islam. So he went to the central bank and forced them to lower the interest rates and start printing money. And what if the central banker, well, he refused and he said, I just don't want to do that. Well, these are Erdogan's words.
The central bank can't take this independence and set aside the signals given by the president. Erdogan speaking to Bloomberg.
So in other words, after the failed coup d'etat of 2016, Erdogan has finally fallen to the dark side. He thinks he can manage the economy at his will. And every rational critic against his economic policy is seen as a Western conspirator. He even named his son-in-law as the finance minister. This new economic paradigm is not a free market or social democracy. This is the new Erdoganomics. Do you need money to pay for your spending? Well, you simply print it. Are Turkish companies complaining? Flood the market with cheap credit. In less than 2 years, Turkish banks have given more than $50 billion worth of loans. And all of this is with almost no interest. The result? Well, that's a crazy devaluation of the Turkish lira.
In 2014, the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Turkish lira was about 2.5 liras to the dollar. At the time of the making of this video, however, the exchange rate is more than 6 liras to the dollar. This means that the Turkish lira has lost 2/3 of its value compared to 4 years ago. This also partially accounts for why inflation rates have risen so high, to 11.9% in the end of 2017.
All right, I know what you're thinking. 11.9% doesn't sound so bad. I mean, in Argentina, they have 3 times that inflation. The truth is that you need some time between a devaluation and the rise in day-to-day prices. So who are the first ones suffering the effects of this deflation? Well, those would be the companies that had loans in foreign banks. And there are more than a few of them. Remember Yildiz Holdings, the food industry behemoth? Well, here you go. Check this out.
Turkish owner of Godiva Chocolate to restructure $6.5 billion worth of debt.
Estimations say that foreign debt from Turkish companies surpasses $300 billion. For a better understanding, this is the same amount of money spent in all of the bailouts of Greece. And meanwhile, the inflation rate is starting to grow little by little. This year, 2018, it's already reached 15%, and all the non-governmental estimations say that at the beginning of 2019, it's going to rise to 22%.
Turkey's sovereign credit rating cut deeper into junk as S&P sees recession next year.
Add to this the sanctions imposed by Donald Trump. We're going to talk about the reasons behind the sanctions in another video, but here we want to focus on the economics, because in the middle of all of this, there is another player with a lot to lose, and that's the European Union. Banks like the Spanish BBVA and the French BNP Paribas or the Italian Unicredit have lent more than $190 billion to Turkish companies. So far, BBVA has already lost half of the value of those investments. So you can already imagine the big gap that a Turkish collapse would leave. So far, Erdogan has said that he won't ask for a bailout from the International Monetary Fund, and he will not raise capital controls either. But can he really stick to his words? We just don't know here. All we know is that both Qatar and China have already promised to help the Turkish economy, but it is still too soon to tell what's going to happen. So now the question, well, it goes to you. Do you think Turkey will become the European Venezuela? Could this localized crisis create a bigger crisis all across Europe? Could Erdogan pull everybody to the dark side? Well, please leave your answer in the comments section below, and as always, don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine, and remember that we publish brand new videos every week, so do hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on a post, and if you like this video, give us a thumbs up, and as always, I'll see you next time.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear more of my lovely voice, don't forget to check out the Reconsider podcast at reconsidermedia.com. Reconsider is a podcast that challenges you to reconsider your views by providing context, but we don't do the thinking for you.